Hello, my name is Daniela Urem. We are here at the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Rijeka, having a big event today with MAST project, UNICULT 2020, and the CCA will present from 5 o'clock until 7 p.m. today. Keynote speaker by Milena Dragicevic. Then we will see Jan Faber, Luka Andreas, and Ivana Jozic talking about the book From Act to Acting. And after Phil Griffin will present his lecture, The Price of Truth, Finding Your Voice as an Artist. Later on, here at the museum, we will see a film Surrender, and I am very pleased to have all of them today with us online. Yes, Milena Dragicevic, please, you can start with the art professions at the crossroads. Welcome.
I'm going now to welcome to our debate and presentation. I will now try to share screen with my presentation. One moment. I hope it's going to work quickly. Is it okay? I hope so. So my task today is to present to you why we think that all sorts of art professions today are at the crossroads and what is happening in this global world, why we need different culture and aesthetics of care, hospitality, and solidarity versus all this, what is happening within cultural policy world. I have devoted my presentation to Osman Kavala, our colleague and friend, cultural activist that is in Turkish prison already for days, but it seems somehow that cultural community, although it is reacting and Culture Action Europe is reacting and European Cultural Foundation, it seems that our voice is not loud enough, vocal enough to help something change in the world, and he is still in prison. Thus, the aim of this lecture is to explore certain dilemmas, controversies, and dichotomies that are facing artists, designers, curators, and cultural managers, all sorts of cultural operators in this art world, which is more and more called creative industry world. And probably we'll have time to discuss what does it mean, this shift from arts and culture toward creative industries. The second very important issue is, are we really a profession? And for one profession, for one human occupation to be called profession, it means that we have to have professional ethics. And that's our discussion today. It's going to be devoted to this issue, to the ethics of cultural worker, cultural manager, cultural operator, artist, designer. And if we will have time, we will devote a little bit more attention to all these professional dilemmas, how they are perceived today during COVID-19 crisis, during this pandemic that hit so cruelly and so harshly this art world. So what is our present situation? What is characteristic of the cultural sector in contemporary world with a different, and I use this Dominique Moissy, French political theorist world, in this new geopolitics of emotions where the globe is divided in between culture of fear, linked to the Western world, culture of humiliation, linked to the Africa, Arab world, even us in the Balkans, from where I'm coming, and culture of hope that is less and less present, maybe in some countries in Asia, because the new political and social dynamics are really, really very different. And what used to be culture of hope of the Western world after the World War II today is really culture of fear that makes walls around Western world to be brought, to be raised bigger and bigger, with the total silence of its population. The latest one is the wall in between two Balkan countries, Serbia and Northern Macedonia, but somehow it's just taken as the must. EU asked us to make these walls to prevent migration to come toward Europe, and we just did it without really clear thought. What are the implications of those wall building around the world? And yes, we have to speak and at least to mention the issues of globalization, which basically means that trends created in the global north, in the Western world, are transmitted toward global south. And from global south, only few things are taken as attractions, as curiosities, and went and marketed in the global north. And sometimes we, cultural operators, are contributing to that, that only pieces of so-called world music can be taken really in account and transmitted in this global world, but not culture as such, not artistic production as such. Migrations are going opposite way, cultural trends from north to south, migrations from south to global north. But there, those who come from global south, they have to adapt, they have to accept, they have, like in Denmark, to learn all these cultural canons that were officially approved and put as a norm. What does it mean to know Danish culture, and what one foreigner have to read, have to listen, have to know how to behave in this culture. That's just an example, but that's very typical for what is going on. At the same time, a new labor ethics also is taking place. Ethics of mass productions, which is aiming toward efficiency, productivity, and even trade unions lost their impact, their meaning. The May the 1st, the Labor Day, is celebrated just representatively without any real meaning. What does it mean? And the richness and the discrepancy of wealth in between few rich, they say 1% of the rich, and 97% of the very, very poor. This discrepancy is becoming bigger and bigger. And yes, many artists are doing through their artworks this questioning of new labor ethics. They are insisting, showing about precarity of artwork, but somehow still it stays out of the codified system of knowledge, out of art schools, universities, debate, and so on. New media, through platforms, through these new social networks that we are even now using, hoping that we are all going to benefit of it, are in fact contributing, seems more, to culture of lies, to this what we call post-truth environment, then that they are really bringing democracy, making each of us producer, not only consumer of the cultural or any other content. There are other issues that we have to discuss, but we will not have time. I will just remind you to keep that in mind. It's a huge ecological crisis. Forests are burning throughout the world, both in the north, like in California, Oregon, and so on, but in the south, like in Amazonia, etc., or now in the Balkans around the Skadar Lake in Montenegro, due to global warming and everything else that is making impact on climate changes. Populism, authoritarianism, and dictatorships are spreading even in the countries that used to be considered as democracy, whether all democracy, like Brazil, with a very extremely populist government today, or new democracies like Poland or Hungary, and so on. And finally, confessional divisions that are becoming extremely important, even in secular countries or countries that used to be proclaimed as once upon a time as secular, like Turkey or India and many, many others. That's global picture, large picture, but we have to focus on cultural governance and to what extent technocracy on one side and populism on the others are affecting cultural field. In spite of the fact that during this COVID-19 crisis, the importance of arts have risen, we saw around the world to what extent music, performances, museum visits have given hope to people that were confined to apartments, that were in lockout, couldn't go out, couldn't have, how to say, conjoined community cultural experience. They were left for this cultural experience through new technologies, but that was even more important than ever. In spite of that, except few governments as exceptions, all the other governments made much more efforts in beating or suppressing effects of pandemics in the business sectors, in sports, even in the bathhouses, in the, how to say, the gyms and so on, while nearly no one talking about impact on publishing industry, on bookshops, on cultural sector at large. Performing artists, however, succeeded in making their issue an issue, but still there is a lot more to be done. New public management that started to be introduced in the Western world since 80s of 20th century demanded in cultural sector to be more efficient, more productive, more market-oriented, to earn. So it brought a lot of instability, insecurity, and precarity in our world, and meritocratic management was replaced by money-making management, whatever implications for cultural life it is. So just to take one example from Serbia, even the call for money for film scenario is divided like 1/3 to art films, 1/3 for national thematics film, 1/3 for commercial films. So those that do not need public support are going to be heavily publicly supported, commercial films, because government think that cinematography is the business, and little bit just art for the sake of representation in foreign festival. And that's more for this identity creation process than really for the arts as such. So yes, in this combination of new public management on one side and populist policies on the other, art sector and art professions has been heavily under pressure. Not only cultural managers that have to become really accountable financially, but even artists, if they want to exhibit, if they want to perform and so on, they had to take all those new demands in account. Of course, in many artists are aware of those processes, and I just put here in front of you one of the Slovenian performance of the youth theater from Ljubljana, how easy it is, in fact, from populism to come to fascism, and how seductive and how easy it is for a little man, for a common person, to accept not only nationalism, but even fascism. So yes, art is in the first rank, or at the first front of this battle against evils of contemporary society. My question is there any possibility for critical reflection, for contextual artistic practice, this artistic practice that is relational towards everything what is happening in society, that might have empathy to all those that are less fortunate than us? I would made your attention, because I understood that most of you that are listening or participating in this debate are coming from the design sector, on this very important book of Milton Glaser and Mirko Ilić, The Design of Dissent, because that's something that we all have to be part of. And my last book that I published, unfortunately only in Serbo-Croat language, is called The Culture of Dissent, because I think that's the culture that is questioning, that is posing crucial questions of today, because the old cultural governance, old cultural institutions, they were not replaced with those that would put public interest in the heart of the matter. Because yes, the culture is public good. Culture is of public interest, not only that we have to use economic arguments and to show how much creative industries are contributing to the national GDPs. That might be important, but not that much important as much culture is contributing to the creation of new values, of critical thinking, of reflection, and so on. So we have to think also what constitutes art power. Are art structures, those big biennials, triennials, and all these festivals and manifestations that dictate trends today, are part of the general world power, or they kept their autonomy and their voice free of political trends? So for us, one of the important questions is, do the system of cultural institution has to be part of the government voice and to reflect governmental policies, or it has to contribute with the creation of a new aesthetics of care, of solidarity, of hospitality, of all those values that are neglected by general public policies. We have also to question what makes this art power really powerful. Is it our silence? Is it only political power that is choosing art power and how to react? Or it is art, or it is silence of artists, majority of artists, art managers, curators, designers, that comply with the system that is also should be accounted responsible. This is one of the work of Maja Bajević, one of my favorite artists coming from Sarajevo, but living in between Paris and Sarajevo, that wanted to deconstruct this mantra of nationalistic public cultural policies of today, that art has to be national and artist has to be national. It's somehow also quotation of the work of Marina Abramović from 1975, where she wanted to deconstruct classical art system, ironically saying art must be beautiful and artist must be beautiful. But now we went much further. This is another work of art that I found also an artist, very important, Milica Tomić, but as you will see, the artists from our world are not living anymore in our world. As Maja Bajević finally is living in Paris, Milica Tomić is living and teaching art in Graz. That's also something that is dramatically happening. We are now not speaking only of brain drain, we are speaking about huge talent drain from all peripheral and semi-peripheral regions of the world. This piece of art, this video, was done as a part of the battle for the peace against nationalism, presenting to what extent telling this mantra, I'm Bosnian, I'm Norwegian, I'm Serbian, I'm Albanian, your body and the body of all of us around become more and more bloody. This piece of art was done before Amin Malouf made a book, Killing Identities, Les Identités Meurtrières, as he was also one of the artists, écrivains, writers from Lebanon, but of course now living in Paris, and it's considered to be French writer, but as an homage to his original identity, Lebanese, he had obligation, felt responsibility, ethical implication to write such a book, to not only inform us, to warn us, that to make one plaidoyer against using of arts and culture in nationalistic policies. It would be, but we are not going to have much time, would be very important to discuss concepts of commons, because it's not only natural resources that we should share as humanity, all cultural resources we have to share, and this feeling of commons, of community, of sharing should be the base of the ethics of every contemporary artist, curator, designer, cultural manager who wants to perform its profession for the benefit of all, for the society. Cultural rights should be the central part of cultural policy practice, of culture as a public sphere. But that's something that we already know for years, that not everyone is entitled to cultural rights. It's where you are born. Bourdieu, even in 1960 in France, made a research to show that those of us who have cultural needs and who perform cultural practices, we are les héritiers. We inherited mostly those cultural needs and practices in the families, and those that haven't been fortunate enough didn't have right to such quality public system of cultural institutions, of cultural education, so that their personality, that their cultural needs can develop. I have to remind you that even today, not everywhere art education is a human right. In primary school, in Morocco, for example, or in Cambodia, the children do not have a right for any art education. So there are still a lot more in front of us, even in front of UNESCO, who succeeded, and United Nations, just to enable people to have right to basic literacy. When we say basic literacy, it's still Gutenberg literacy, but not much more than that. So today, I think that we are not on the crossroad for that, but that we have to make a synergy of public initiatives on one side, of initiatives of cultural institutional system, of all of us that have privilege to be members of art associations, cultural association, and so on, but also on one side, on the other, of citizens, of civic imagination. And that's our duty, to make those kind of platforms where the voice of citizens, where their artistic expressions can be seen, can be heard, and so on. Cultural institutions have to become agents of changes, but not on the way how it is effective today, because we cultural operators, we are looking to each other. So we are trying to imitate. So when Guggenheim was created in Bilbao, we are now imitating that and want to create such a kind of museum by star architect in many other cities, thinking that that's crucial. No, that's not crucial. That might be crucial for local economy, for city branding, but it's not crucial for the standpoint of the well-being of the humanity and so on. So official policies of urban regeneration have to dialogue and have to fight sometimes with independent initiatives such as it was a museum initiative in Sarajevo, with activism, self-organization in neglected neighborhoods of different cities, because new hubs, new platforms for creative industries, new design clusters, Belgrade design neighborhood, and so on. This is only part of the answer. This is the answer for already privileged, for those who already have training, who have skills, and now they are going to have to create their common community of practice, design practice, but they are going once again, to self-isolated from the real community and to make kind of a new types of elite neighborhoods within the city. So I would just like to raise those issues as a new ethical challenge in front of us, because I might also grab such opportunity where our government say we are going to now reconstruct the old parts of the railway station to create art hubs. But should we say something about it? That the citizens of Belgrade are deprived of railway station, which is moved on the suburb, and now certain group, very small group of artists is going to have a privilege to have a hub and to have ateliers and to have spaces for rehearsal in the very center of the city. Will that really change something in cultural life, in environment, and so on? So these are all controversial issues that we have to tackle. What is the risk, not only of gentrification, but also of our further self-isolation? So I use here one of the drawing of Vahida Ramujkic, artist from Serbia of Bosnian origin, done for one of my books written in French, how cultural policies and educational policies, they really try to knit together something like democracy, social justice, equality, human dignity. But unfortunately, you see this hand below of mercantilization, of market, of profit, that is distorting those things that weak cultural policies, weak public policies, because to be very honest, cultural policies and even educational policies cannot fight with the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Security, whatever ministries are in today's world considered to be the key ministries in any of the government. In Cambodia that I studied, so I would give from time to time few examples because they are extreme, but they are very helpful to understand processes. They even made gradation, a 3 level of ministries. So first level of the most important ministries with the biggest budget and autonomy, then the second layer of the ministries and the bottom layer. And the Ministry of Culture is in the bottom layer, and that means that this ministry do not have a single penny out from the budget for its disposal. They have 3,000 salaries that is given through them, from government, through them to cultural operators, museums, libraries for salaries. That's it. So nothing, zero money for making any reform, for making any policy. Not that serious, but somehow like that, it's in many other countries. Thus, what we need now is so-called collective intelligence. Intellectuals and artists today, together with civic movements, to create civic engagement in cultural space, because culture is probably still the only public space that might give voice to new thoughts and not yet told issues. It's a space for direct democracy practice, because political space is occupied by political parties, and the voice of those that do not belong to political parties is unheard. Media space is occupied with reality shows, with commercial content, with the huge production of insignificant content. So it's to discuss some intercultural issues, dissonant and negative past, for example, culture of memory. Now we can do it better and more through arts, through architecture, through creation of the public space with design and artistic thinking, than in the space for political debate. I would use exactly the example of Jochen Gert's counter monument, and I would advise all of you to look after the lecture how it is, what does it mean really, this counter monument practice that Jochen Gertz, together with citizens of certain city, is reflecting on a negative past, on something that we as citizens would like to forget, how we shamefully behaved once upon a time. We in Serbia, in Srebrenica, those in Germany during Holocaust, but all of us today regarding immigrants. Look what's going on Lesbos Island. What is the behavior? Who is hearing the voice of the repressed and so on? So yes, civic imagination, those voices that coming from people, we have to take more in account and try to link expert knowledge, artistic exploration with civic imagination. I just very often put that in our Balkan context, speaking about Women History Museum, virtual ones, because no real exist, or Museum of Childhood, as possible actions, as possible areas which can really unite intellectuals, researchers, artists, but also every citizen. All of us, we have some artifact reminding us history of our women ancestors that are not in public museums, in public institutional system, that remind us of our common childhood, that are not divisive regarding ethnic origin and so on. We all play balls or we play with puppets and so on. So this is something that can that exploring that, we are going to explore what is linking us, not what is dividing us. Of course, at the same time, we have to fight those populist policies that are overwhelming today in the world, creating even totally new cities like Skopje 2014 or Belgrade waterfront, or creating this paysage, which I saw, for example, and mostly you can see them during 6 months or even throughout the year in, let's say, authoritarian countries. This is the Belgrade, where New Year decorations stay for 6 months to prevent population to think. Just look that and enjoy, and you look this decoration and you see that this is consumeristic decoration. Same was that I saw lastly, just before this Belarus demonstration in city of Gomel, where these kitschy aesthetics of New Year decoration throughout the year is really standing whole year round. So we are in a need now for the new aesthetics that question this aesthetic of spectacularization, commodification, those artists that are now presented in the major museums of the world because, and only because, their pieces are valued on several millions or several 100 millions and so on of dollars, euros, and whatever. We had in city of Novi Sad in Serbia demonstration in front of Damien Hirst exhibition. Why? Because the artists and citizens thought that neither money of Serbian government, neither the money of British Council should be spent, public money shouldn't be spent for those artists that are highly praised on the market and that even do not care, like Damien Hirst, who is buying because most of his pieces has been bought by Ukrainian tycoon. So yes, civil society have developed many different strategies in re-establishing different dialogues in between themselves, in between community. We see here one, project, activistic on the green market of the design, used to be only design, now it's a really artistic group, Škart from Belgrade, distributing their poems to the market with the help of one late artist, Microbe, that was famous by these mask coverage and actions. I'm not going to discuss that in detail. These are some actions in the mass, different projects that wants to raise public awareness about power of the art, possibility of art to make a dialogue, to offer different sense of responsibility. Here on the right side, you can see also one piece of Milica Tomic, XY Ungelost. That's a piece of art that was created after she heard about mass killings in Kosovo in 1990 during the riots on that territory at the end of the 90s. But there is not much discussion about it. You cannot read much about it. So artists today have to develop this aesthetics of care. And that's something that for Milica Tomic, for Maja Bajević, her work of art, you can also see here on the right-hand side, it's Women at Work cycles. And here are women from Srebrenica that she put on the facade of the museum that was going to be closed and saved later on by people's action, that they can put their art, their tapestry, their what embroideries and so on. But by doing that for days, they made themselves visible, but then again, behind those artwork, they became invisible. There are many other, because Why I put it here of hospitality, citing the Rida text about it? Because these women, they are displaced persons, because we don't use the word migrant if you are, how to say, if you cannot live anymore in your city, your village, but it's still within one same country. So you are just displaced person. But in fact, you came in a new environment where everyone is looking at you as a refugee. And one of the, for me, how to say, even when I remarked that I stopped using the word refugee and started using the word migrant, I realized to what extent our minds are brainwashed. These people, or most of them, are not migrants. They are refugees. They are escaping evils in their country. Would it be Syria? Would it be Afghanistan? It's not calm. It's not normal. It's not nice. And many women still from around the world have to escape countries that are considered to be very stable and very, let's say, normal, like Turkey, because violence toward women is something that in many cultures is still, unfortunately, normalized, as violence against LGBT, as a violence against many other smaller groups, or in India, violence toward the Dalit, non-touchable, untouchable population is something that is normalized in spite of the law that guarantee equality, but those people are not equal. So Derrida, in his discussion, said an act of hospitality can only be poetic. And yes, I put here, some of you might recognize from time to time drawings of Dan Perzhowski, that people have been kicked out from their country of origin, but at the same time they're kicked out from their country of destination. There is no hospitality in today's world toward anyone. There is a kind of we know we have to accept them, but let's isolate them, let's put them somewhere. And from time to time, yes, there are some artists that do some Action for Hope, for example, in Lebanon, is NGO that is doing a lot of hospitality toward Syrian refugee, especially children and women and so on. And artists are part of these processes and so on. But we have to rethink all these aesthetics of hospitality and how to link that with culture and aesthetics of care, which are notions that came to theory of arts from feminist theory. But today, these forms of affective solidarity and mutual regard has to become powerful counterweights to the exclusion and disregard in a careless society. Because you know what neoliberalism did to all of us? If we failed, it's our guilt. We haven't been skillful enough, clever enough, capable enough. Even art school today, ELIA, as European League of the Institute for the Arts, that encompass all art schools in Europe, had to make specific trainings about entrepreneurialism to tell to every single art school in Europe, you have to have courses in entrepreneurialism. Every artist has to become entrepreneur. And then if he gets this skill in the school, then he is responsible for his career. No one else is responsible to make system of public institution, to make better measures of public cultural policies, etc., to give better conditions for civil society. So Governance will not be responsible anymore, neither city, neither regional, neither state governance. Only each of us is going to be responsible for our own career. That's something that I would to fight with culture and aesthetics of care, that we through self-organization, through different types of movement, have to help each other, and us helped mutually have to help even less privileged others, our citizens, neighbors, to understand and to fight and to see from their own eyes what are characteristic of contemporary world. I also wanted to take your attention to this book, Participatory Art for Invisible Communities, Designing with Homeless People, and so on, to different examples that are compiled here, why participatory art today is even more important for those communities that are invisible, that we don't care about. These women, refugees from Srebrenica, they are totally invisible everywhere except once a year, 11th of July, when they all come to Srebrenica and then media comes and so on. Otherwise, they are dispersed or they are still put in some collective premises, and they are, as a collective, absolutely invisible. We don't, I'm looking, I know I have to close it, so we are going to skip a few more examples about those aesthetics of care, aesthetics of solidarity. And I had to say, we have to show solidarity with all subaltern, exiled, oppressed. And this is, for example, one theater show that happens always 10th of July on the public square of Belgrade, day before Srebrenica Genocide Memorial, because then Dah Theater is going to Srebrenica next day. But as you can see around, there is not much people. People, when they see what's that about, they run away. They are curious, they see theater happening in the square. But it's crucially important for the art sector to show their solidarity with oppressed, with exiled, with subaltern, with all those that are prevented to mourn. So Antigone was written 2,500 years ago, but it's still actual. And yes, what we are facing today, and this sculpture is a very good example of Emilia and Ilya Kabakov, Eternal Immigrant. That one which is around the wall, and it's cannot return back, cannot go further. And what we are doing, we are just observing. Silvia Jestrovic made fantastic essay about it, what this sculpture is really meaning or should mean to all of us. Many acts. Here we see, for example, artists in Austria, in Innsbruck, attacked by the Austrian woman in national costume and other one crying on artists because they don't want those folk groups are organized and prevent such a kind of performances, even in so-called Western democracies such as Austria is, to tell their story. There are numerous examples of empathy and solidarity actions in the different theater performances. Patriotic Hypermarket that you are seeing now is one of them, for the first time enabling citizens of Kosovo and Serbia to hear the story of the other, because citizens, Serbs of Kosovo, think that they are only victim. Kosovo Albanians think that they are only victim, and none of the two really knows that they are both victims and that victims are existing on both sides. And maybe this is a good slide to finish the presentation, that this culture of humiliation, where the most of the people from where the migrants are coming today to the West world are coming, is in the culture of humiliation that provokes rage and anger. And here is a Sheila Kameric work, Bosnian girl, one of the most, I would say, representative work of art that remind of us what is the really opinion of the global north, because this graffiti is a real graffiti in a caserne in Srebrenica of Dutch soldiers. That was their opinion about girls they were to protect. So it's very easy to understand why they didn't protect. And just also one thing to say, in these both worlds, in the world of Srebrenica under siege, and in the world of Kazan, of foreign militaries there to protect, there was no word, there was no single experience of art and culture. And then all the evils were and are still possible. I would stop here, probably leaving some moments for questions, if we still have time. There was no single experience of art and culture. And then
thank you very much, Milena. We just need, because the video is coming a little late, so we just need to turn that off. Thank you very much for your lecture. It's amazing.
I think you should, Daniela, put microphone on and they will turn off the Facebook or other screenings.
Okay, I guess you can hear us now clearly. I wanted to thank you very much for your lecture. It is very interesting because the last artwork you show in your presentation, we are currently showing it here at the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Rijeka, where we are now. Milena, we have two questions for you, and Vanda and Anya will ask you each. One is coming from Peter Purk, and I believe the second from Akram, our student, UNICULT student, if you remember. So please.
So this is a question that was posed at the beginning of your lecture. Hi.
Hi.
It goes like this. Can artistic education truly contribute to questioning, deconstructing, if not downright iconoclasting, the overly empowered aristocracy machinery? In short, can and should activism be taught and studied?
Absolutely, yes. I'm coming from University of Arts. I used to be a rector of...
artistic education truly contribute to questioning, deconstructing, if not downright iconoclasting, the overly empowered artists?
I think absolutely yes, because I come from University of Arts and I used to be a rector from 2000 to 2004. And in that time, we really wanted to change art education to go out of the atelier to, okay, certain skills you have to gain, skills in film directing, skills in drawing, skills in playing piano and so on. But through certain let's say, summer schools, some joint projects of our students in public, outside. We try to make art students aware of issues in community, because many of our students, not all, but many, are coming, especially, for example, in the field of music. They are coming from families that had cultural needs and habits and so on. So they enlisted them in music schools since they've been 5 to 6 and so on. So it's art students are very often part of the community that sometimes never been in a village, for example. Never knows how live, never saw a factory from inside, etc., etc. So these are kind of things that we wanted to make them to feel responsibly, organized a lot of debates, activistic actions. And one of the advantage of our school system was that we have also students of cultural management and development. So our students from Faculty of Drama, they usually are linking and making projects to connect students to even to using different media, internet, radio, making different podcasts, or making films, or making public art performances and so on. So I think activism should be learned at school, and a lot of debates. It doesn't have to be curriculum in a sense you pass exam and you write test about it and so on, but you create some art project which has certain relevance, and it can be group, it doesn't have to be necessarily individual one. This kind of thing can be very, now for example, School of Architecture in Belgrade is doing fantastic things, going where before never architects were going, to the Stara Planina mountain, where people are defending rivers. You might say, what architecture has to do with small mountain rivers? They are now helping people, helping those inhabitants. These are very small villages, no money for any kind of new construction, but they are really wanting to show to students of architecture different situations, different environment, and try to connect this civic activism to save local rivers with conceptions, debates, and so on. Now we will have time to listen for Peter Purk question, yeah?
Yeah. Thank you, Milena.
Now we will have time to listen for Peter Purk question, yeah?
These were the two questions in one combined.
So should art activism be taught and studied?
That I think I responded, yes, it can, and it should be taught. And it should be taught, only it absolutely shouldn't be questioned like some of knowledge about it, but as a practice, as something that you do, to inspire students to do it.
Thank you, Milena. See you.
You.
Hello, I'm Daniela Urem from Croatian Cultural Alliance, talking from the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Rijeka on behalf of the CCA and as well MAST project, which is Master Model in Art, Science, Technology. We are organizing hybrid event, which will screen from all our partners, and one in Rijeka. I am very honored and pleased to have with me our three guests, Jan Faber, Ivana Jozic, and Luke van den Dries. They will talk today about the book which is coming up, and it's called From Act to Acting, written by Luke van den Dries, and it is all about teaching of Jan Faber and True Blind Teaching Group. So welcome. I don't think that I need very much to introduce you. I will just say that it's a pleasure to work with people who are so multidisciplinary in a way of as well teaching, research, art, creativity, innovation. Jan Faber was a pioneer and visionary from his early stages of work, and this continues through his whole career by now, which is well also visible in the teaching process. At what point in your career started this urge to create your own training method?
Hello, I'm Jan Faber. I'm in Antwerp, in my visual art studio. Quite early, essentially, in 1982, when I made my 8-hour performance, This is Theater Like It Was to Be Expected and Foreseen, I was already teaching in the company, and it was for practical reasons, because we didn't have money to hire somebody to, let us say, to do the starting warming up and to give training to the actors and the dancers. So I did myself. It came out of practical reasons because there was no money. I had to do it myself. And essentially, it was quickly that I figured out that all these young actors I was working with in dancers, they were not so good physical trained. And what I did in the beginning was almost a combination of my football training, because I played on high level football, so I knew a lot of, let us say, physical exercises for the footballers that I gave to my performers. It was from, let us say, push-ups for the belly training. And also in those days, I was involved in Taekwondo also. It was a fight sport. So I used elements from out of the football, elements from out of the Taekwondo training. Then I had a friend who was a logopedist, and he was next to me, and we were already, let us say, busy with the voice, the speech, the breathing, involving, let's say, in exercises I took from the football and the Taekwondo fighting. Then later, by experience, the rehearsals, because we had long working processes in those days, because we all worked for no money, so we could work very long, we were young. So, for example, that piece, I worked on it for, I think, 7 months or 8 months. So, in the course of the creation and the rehearsal, I adapted constantly my teaching, what the actors, the dancers needed. Then later, I also started doing that, kendo, and then also elements of the kendo I brought into my teaching. So it made a kind of organic evolution over the years, that, let us say, lesser, let us say, elements of the football training, elements of the Taekwondo training, elements of the kendo training became lesser, were, let us say, adapted more to the performers. And so slowly I started developing essentially a training. And it came first out of practical reasons, because there was no money. I had to do it myself. And the idea, the deep interest in researching experimenting, feeling what did these people need to be in this long working process to become physically and mentally stronger. Because we were making an 8-hour performance. So that's the way, slowly, essentially from the beginning, I started teaching in my own company.
Thank you. But what is specific about this training in a sense that is different for existing training approaches?
Of course, now we have to jump in time. Let us say years later, already in the late 80s, I made already the Power of Theatre of Madness. I made in 87 my first choreography, the dance sections that I worked with classical ballerinas. So out of that experience, my teaching also adapted. And slowly, because I made on that moment already 4 productions, slowly, let us say, I took elements from my performances who I felt were very important about the idea, the bridge between acting and acting, from act to acting, and also the bridge between, let us say, performance art and theater. I was introducing real time and real action in the performances, and this element I was introducing also in the teaching. So, and then also by working for a year long with classical dancers, I learned a lot from them. They were close collaborators. Then also there, let us say, I took elements from in the teaching. And so that's the reason it, over the 40 years almost, it developed to what we have today. And the big difference is, I think, with my teaching and a lot of other teaching is that it's what we call the physiological acting, that with us, let us say, that psychology is essentially not there in the first level. Everything starts with us from, let us say, the physiological reactions, what's created in the body during the training or on stage, to be aware of this and to make, let us say, to understand that the emotions are generated by the physiological reactions inside of your body, and to be aware of this, and then to find the bridge to understand this, to have a control about this, and then to find the bridge to use these physiological reactions, like for simply being tired, to the bridge from acting, and to work with this. So the main difference between the lots of other teachings is it's all about the physiological process, what's happening in the body.
It pushes. So Luc Andreas is a professor of theater studies at the University of Antwerp, and his research deals with contemporary theater. Luc, would you like to reflect on any of these 2 questions from your standpoint?
First of all, thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here with my good friends with whom I collaborated already for a very long time on this project. Let's say I met Jan really very early in my career. In 1982, I saw the first performance which he mentions, which started also the working on training. And I was very fascinated by the work, by the way performers were on stage. It was something which was really not seen before. It was completely innovative. So we had already very early a contact in the sense that Jan was doing research, like deep research, on theater, on performance, and on performativity. And I was in the same track, interested in kind of innovative performances. And so we started already very early to create a research center, which was based at the University of Antwerp, which was called the ICE Thesis. And from there, we have been collaborating very closely on this idea of academic and artistic research, the combination, in fact, of thinking about theater and researching on the floor. And so 10 years ago, I think it was about 10 years, Jan, that Jan came to give a lecture at university for my students. And we were like sitting on a staircase. He was smoking a cigarette, and he asked me, "And what if we would create a book together on, let's say, the performative research I'm doing?" I said yes. So we launched a very interesting, deep research on what is acting, does it mean to be on stage, what happens for the actor, not only physiologically but also vocally. It was really a research project in which we collaborated very intensely with Jan, but also with the actors involved, and certainly the three of them who were like collaborating very closely on the project. And I remember that it was really an ongoing research project, in the sense that every time we found the time, because that was already an issue, of course, to find time to be together and to do this research together. That was either at university, but either during performative research, or in the so-called laboratories, because apart from Jan's work as visual and theater art, performative art, he also runs a laboratory. And this book is really, let's say, conceived from out of this laboratory. So it is an idea from research on the body, with the actors, and with us as co-authors, you could say, on this project. Voilà.
Yeah, thank you. But
I want to, Daniela,
yes, please. Yes.
also make it a bit conversation. Look, you said it was ongoing project. Actually, it's still ongoing. And I think I just want to add that all the people involved are people who never stop. So I feel like this is something that still keeps on evolving and keeps on growing, and people still keep on researching, although the book is almost out. So that's something I wanted to add.
Yes, thank you, Ivana, but exactly what you said, because from act to acting, it's a guideline for the performer of the 21st century. And it's a book that wants to prepare a performer for the new age. And we are talking about the new age now. We have a new normality. We have Corona as well present with us, which was not planned, of course, in any of our work. But when you speak about the performer, is that what the performer is different from the actor, or how do you, Jan Fabri, if you please can answer this? In your own opinion, what is the difference?
Lady, it's from the beginning of the 80s, I worked with, in my company, and it came also from practical, the Anarchy of Love. I worked with classical dancers from 1980 already, the classical dancers, and some actors. Then later, in 82, there were some musicians involved, dancers, actors, later some even performance artists, because I did myself a lot of performances when I was young. So I brought inside, in the performance, but also in the teaching, the idea of performance art, real time, real action, in a theater codex. So for me, very early, it was the idea of an actor was very, let's say, 19th century, still a very bourgeois concept. The actor, the idea of an actor is from the 19th century. And I felt immediately the group of people I had, they were open, let's say, to be contaminated by the idea of performance art, the history of performance art, doing performance art, knowing the history of acting, being trained in a classical way as an actor also with the dancers, they were trained in a classical way. And this group, let us say, they contaminated each other to create essentially a performer from the 21st century. Not anymore the dancer, who is usually, you have first the actor, then the dancer comes in theater or in opera or in ballet, and then something performance art was not in theater. Then also the knowledge of visual arts, what means the human body in visual arts. So essentially, over the years, we trained the company with these different consiliences to train a performer who has knowledge, let us say, from a background, historical, even physical, from acting, dancing, performance art, and a knowledge of visual arts also. And this for me creates a performer of the 21st century.
Yes, thank you. I remember, I don't know if you remember the ULI last summer when we were exactly at this museum where I am now. He referred to you as a first person who actually spread performance art to the theater and to the stage. And it's just when you were talking now, I remember this. I remember him, of course. So
for me, the performer, let us say, after 5 years in the company, 5 years training, they're getting the title the Warrior of Beauty.
yes,
It's a performer who essentially sees his, let us say, his own body as a tool of research, right? In all levels, physically, mentally, voice-wise, and let us say, he knows the strength of his own vulnerability.
yes, yes. And you who are leading them and teaching them in a way are pushing really this creativity that humans, I think, can have and can experiment with, that can show to all the rest of the science or even technology today, how far we can go in our emotions, in our movements, in everything that we do. Ivana Josic, you are a dancer, actor, and you have been with Trueline for many, many years. When you follow the dance training, how much a dancer can really learn from this approach? What this meant for you?
Well, I was trained originally as a dancer, classical ballet dancer, and then I did a school for contemporary dance. And I'll just say my story that when I was asked as a young dancer, when I was working with the company, I was around 22, and I was asked to speak on stage, I started crying. Because as a dancer, you're really afraid to speak on stage. You're afraid to use any other means than the movement. You're not trained like that. You're just trained to move. And I refused. I said, I will not speak. I cannot speak. I was really terrified, but literally terrified. Afterwards, I started to work with Jan. I worked with him for many years, and I ended up studying acting. And this is thanks to working with Jan. This is thanks to the process I went through with this guiding line. And why I'm telling this story is because I think it's incredible what it does, not only to dancers, but also to actors, also to musicians. I would not divide that in a way. What does with dancers is that they become free with language, with words, with performing, with emotions, and they can do that easily because they start with the body. So it's not that somebody tells them from outside how to speak, but they find an authentic way of performing and talking, because for them it's easier because it starts with the body. So I would describe this almost like your cells tell you how to perform or how to talk. So it's not something artificial that comes into it. It's not a technique. You can, of course, what I did after I went and tried to study a technique, because I deeply believe in a combination of instincts and technique. But what the guiding line does, it actually sharpens your own authenticity, your own intuition, in performance, in text, and then for actors in the body. What does to actors is something a little bit different. I call it, it purifies them. It washes them. I always feel like they're washed after they left our workshop a little bit. Why I'm saying this is because through working deeply with their own body, they access to kind of primal emotions. They tap into primal emotions, and I think also in their acting, then they become more authentic, and it helps them a lot. It helps them also to get in touch with their bodies, because today a physical actor is a very fashionable term, but I see a lot of very trained actors, but who are not physical actually. They're just pumped up, full of muscles, and they still, you know, act only with the upper part of the body, but they're not in touch with their body. And what the guiding line does to an actor, it connects the imagination, the mind, the performing, the acting with the body, all the cells they start.
It's very holistic, and actually you become all that is
your
forced from you.
whole system starts performing. There is no dividing anymore. There is no it's not, you know, mental, and your whole body speaks out. So
essentially, our goal is to connect, I think, the brain, the heart, and the sex.
So this is something like chakras. You know, there are many different approaches, but to use this in artistic way, it's important. Luke, when you write about this approach and about the training and the guidelines, how do you perceive the difference between actors, dancers? What for you, how you follow this approach?
No, I think the main thing about this training is that it's going beyond the idea of the 19th century actor. It's in fact, it's in touch with the kind of new way of being on stage, which leaves behind the idea of text or the idea of body. It leaves behind the divisions that are so much still going on between all these media and between all these ways of being on stage. So it's search for a kind of new performer that has a kind of knowledge about the history of theater, and at the same time is able to dive deeply into himself and into his own capacities in the art of becoming. And that's the real art of the performer. It's a constant being born, in fact, like another shape, another transformation, another metamorphosis.
Absolutely.
So it's a constant new ways of becoming. And there, the fantastic thing about this training is that it opens up so many horizons to find new ways of animality, humanity, spirituality. So it's all the shades, in fact, of human and non-human life that are being brought on stage, and the training is meant to open this horizon, not only technically but also spiritually and physically.
Well, yes, thank you. I can say that for students that even Josic and Annabelle Chambon trained here in Rijeka last summer, these students, they really had epiphany. They became much more brave, and they said that their complete approach towards what they were doing before, they are trained dancers and actresses as well. Now they went into producing. Now they collected a couple of students from different countries in Europe, and they are doing their own play. So I can tell in practical way that everything what you are writing about, and it's all about the Jan Faber teaching and approach, and of course dancers and teachers that could spread this to more people around. It really makes very fast change. It makes fast effect to people feeling more secure about themselves and having more empathy towards and understanding where is the core that they are coming from. So this happened to my students, and it's very important for I think they will continue to the future that way. And this break point was really amazing. So this you don't call your approach a method. Instead, you speak of guiding lines. And one of the basic principles of this book is to reflect in the title, from act to acting. So how much acts we need into acting? Jan or Luke?
On purpose, and this was a conversation between me and Luke already for 10 years ago. On purpose, we didn't want to call it a method, because we also, when we teach, we have some homages. We have an homage to Meyerhold, we have an homage to Grotowski, we have an homage to De Croo, to Jacques Lecoq. So when you read, let us say, The Lost 100 Years, all the books from the great masters, like Stanislavski, Grotowski, even Peter Brook, all this, or even dance methods, you feel after 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, they're out of date, they're out of time. Because life is changing, humanity, we adapt, we transform constantly, we learn new things. So, and for me, historically, the one who survived, who I still can read today, who gives us still an incredible philosophical and spiritual approach, is Anthony Artaud. Because with Anthony Artaud, still today you read it, it still has an openness for the future. It's still visionary. Because it's not a method. It's more a guiding line of thinking, of approaching. And of course, we developed, in the book, we wrote down all the exercises, very important block of exercises, as a guiding line, but essentially, it's all about that nothing is fixed. Let us say, there are tools to research, elements to research, but it's all about essentially a self-education to sharpen the imagination of the brain, the imagination of the art, and the imagination of the sex, and to bring these consilience together. And that's makes it, that's the reason I think this guiding line can survive longer, can maybe survive 50 years, 100 years, or even longer. And because it's the guiding line is about also the future already, you understand? To not block things for people, to not have a dogmatic principle, to have a kind of guiding line of, a guiding line that keeps you alert to rethink, reset, reinvent.
Interesting. Yes, it's very interesting. It's more about a person and how to take out from them their potential. Maybe Ivana can tell us her experience working with students at the True Blind Teaching Group. What are your approach?
I just want to confirm essentially what Jan said. I think it's really important that this guiding line is not a goal. It's not that these students have to come out being perfectly able in doing what we are trying to bridge to them. But this guiding line is there to open up their potential through all the elements that are inside. And these models, and each model is very well thought what this model is exercising or opening up or giving to people. And afterwards, they can use what they experienced in any kind of aesthetic. So this is not the final goal. It's not like when you're in ballet class, your final goal is to execute the movement in a perfect way, wherever you go with it. But here is not the case. So I think it's just a door to open up.
Yes, and what I liked very much that although this is guideline and in a book, it could be read by all people that are interested. Your approach is very individual towards each student. I remember that you mentor them and you recognize as well how to pull out from them their own potential.
That was, I think, very important.
It's a very intense workshop. It's really intense process. And you have to monitor the people very carefully, because even when people are, you know, when people are a long time in the company, they slowly get into it. But when people are there for a short time, you have to see how they deal with the proposed material, and you monitor them and see them, how you guide them through so that they get the best out of it. And because it's so intense, this is why they get so much out of it. So you cannot, you know, you cannot pull back there. You have to bring them there in order for them to reach something. So it's this this line you have to walk.
Yes, but look, isn't this another important principle in the combination of intuition, instinct, and intelligence? These 3 I's that are described in the book.
Yeah, it's what Jan already mentioned twice. It's this combination of brains, heart, and sexuality, which is, let's see, the 3 main drives of a human being. And if you can be in balance with the 3 of them, you have like an intensive joy, an intensive emotional journey, an intensive physical journey. And these 3 elements are the core tools, you could say, to train the actor in general, because these are very general principles. Of course, the book has many layers, like the work of Jan has also many layers. And you could say it's philosophical treatment about theater and performance in the 21st century, what it is about. And at the same time, it's giving tools to actors, dancers to be on stage. And at the same time, it's a playground, you could say, a playground to try out things in the so-called improvisations and choreographic models. So it's also a thing of putting things on stage from joy and from pleasure of being an actor, because that's a tremendous, great profession, you could say.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. To elaborate on the 3 ideas from intuition, instinct, and intelligence.
Yes.
Essentially, it's we guiding the people we teach, we guide them. We not teach them, we guide them to open their own intuition. That means we trust essentially the knowledge of the body, what everybody has in their body, the intuition. It's the heart, to be the athlete of the heart. You guide them to trust this. Then they have to go to the instinct, the sexuality, the animalistic side, the transformation. They have to go there. By doing this process, they can feel what's happening, experience physically and mentally what's happening, and therein comes the intelligence, therein comes the thinking. By experience, they can reflect, they can feel, and the brain will then adapt and see, we have to do, I feel this, that means I have to do that to go further. So this is the 3 steps: intuition, instinct, and intelligence. Out of the intelligence, when you understand the process, you can again open the door to intuition and to instinct. And this 3 brings you deeper and further into the process. As an artist, as a performance artist, as an actor, a dancer, a student.
Yes, and this deep, honest, I would say, raw approach, and it's also the exercise that you are based on animal life. It's also something that is so natural and so led by instinct, right? So how is this connected? What can we learn from animals in the sense of body movement? And
I think that animals are the best doctors and philosophers in the world. Animals, they can survive in places we cannot. Animals, they can cure themselves. We have to go to doctors. So they're very, to study animals is to be open to yourself also, that you're also kind of animal, that you're linked with them. and that they have an intelligence that we don't have as humans. So we can learn a lot from animals. And I think all the teaching, all my work is always about, essentially, about the transformation from human to animal to human.
So it's together. But for who this manual is written, what you would say? Mostly, for dancers and actors.
Sorry, say it again, please.
For which audience is this manual written?
Maybe
which audience this?
Yeah. For who is this book mainly focused? When you were thinking about the process and look, when you were writing the book, who was your audience?
Well, of course, in the first place, it's actors, performers, dancers who are interested in this approach, which opens up, as we said already, a kind of new way to be from your own authentic being on stage and becoming this large specter of between humanity and animality and spirituality. And at the same time, it's meant certainly for people who are just interested in theater. As Jan mentioned, one of the models for this book was indeed Antonin Artaud. And so we wanted also to write like almost a manifesto about what theater of the 21st century could be about. So it's also like a more philosophical treatment on theater. So it's also for a larger audience who are interested in what is theater today.
Thank you. And Ivana, how do you think that this book will be applied to your further teaching at the True Blind Teaching Group?
But first of all, it's a compilation of a lot of years of work. So it will be fantastic to keep it physically in the hand, to be able to open it and tap into all this work. So I find it incredibly valuable because I know how much is behind. And I find it valuable also because the book has, as Luke said, so many levels. Luke has written about the exercises in such a poetic way. It's so beautifully written. Jan's thinking is inside. And then you have this practical level from stage, the manual where people who actually for years did these exercises have written down, we have written down all the exercises by the experience we have of stage. So this book is very three-dimensional in a way. And I think it will be invaluable for the teaching, as for students, but also for the guides, teachers, because for students, they will be able to clarify things or enrich themselves while they're doing workshops or after or before. And also the same goes for people who are going to guide these workshops. So for me, it's an invaluable
tool that
we have the experience, lady. We have the experience by teaching now already more than 20 years worldwide. We teach in the Royal Academy of London. We teach in French schools, Italian schools, everywhere in the world, America. And what we notice that even so-called classical trained actors from Spain, from Germany, who do movies, television series, they come to us and they leave the teaching with an incredible bag of tools. They become sharper. And we notice also, we see a lot of famous actors who came to us, and we see them in German movies or in Italian movies. We see that they really became sharper, that they took from us things, from our teaching, to their, let us say, more classical popular acting. We also notice that classical ballerinas who come, they approach suddenly their classical dance in a different way. They breathe in a different way. So we have on different levels, let us say more the classical popular actors, the classical dancers, but also then people, let us say, who busy more with experimental theaters, with contemporary theaters. they also get a lot from it. You understand? Also directors, choreographers, visual artists. We have often also visual artists to come in to watch the teaching or to be part of the teaching.
To get
You see this afterwards, how they use this, how they apply this in their installations or the visual arts, or how they work with people. So we feel, and that's the most important thing essentially, all these people who come from different, let us say, levels or universes, they go away with a kind of strong, deep awareness that they can be proud on their own imagination. We are sharpening their imagination of their body, of their minds, and you feel as they use this, they become more condensed and sharper. They make more stricter choices. They are more aware of the semiotics, what they want to give to their public.
Yes, and I would say also that they experience more freedom and more confidence in who they are after these trainings, because then they are capable to really express this individuality and what is. So is this book meant as a heritage or?
As an artist,
everything is meant as a heritage.
As an artist,
you mean everything as a heritage?
Of course.
The thing is, as an artist, when you do not believe, I mean, I'm not gambling on today as an artist. I'm gambling on the future. So, as an artist, when you not believe that you can give something to people for the future, yeah, then I mean, I would not be busy as an artist, I think. I mean,
yeah, that's interesting.
I think as an artist, you always work for your utopic public, for your utopic future, for the best circumstances. So that means that that when something is fundamental, very serious and deep, then you not gamble on the success of today. You gamble on the success of in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years.
This is an amazing description of what creativity is. Actually, for artists, if we say this way, present hardly exists. It's always creativity pushing innovation and forward, and what next, and what can be layered up, and what we could do with this and connect to other. So it's amazingly interesting. I think that we covered a lot about this book. I am really looking forward for a book to be published and to be distributed worldwide, as well used in project as a MAST project, where science, art, and technology becomes one. And this is what you are showing actually through your teaching and through your work, that all these natural things that we have in ourselves are more valuable and more emphasized in a way of this artistic freedom and a way of challenging many, many things. For things to happen. So yes, I would love to thank you very much for your time, sharing everything with us and with our students. And we hope to see you soon here at the museum in Rijeka again and everywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, lady. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So hello again from Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art. Now we will announce a lecture of Phil Griffin. Please, Wanda, Anya.
Yes, we are very looking forward for this lecture because it is called The Price of the Truth, Finding Your Voice as an Artist. And I'm really curious about finding my voice as an artist in this chaotic 21st century where you have to multitask and do all the things that you have to you're not only a performer. Today, you are also doing a lot of other things, like producing, directing, acting, and all kinds of stuff. I have a question for you, Phil, before we start. Maybe if you can tell us, you're like multi-talented artist. You worked with a lot of famous people, celebrities, artists, like Adele, Britney Spears, Paul McCartney, John Bon Jovi, and stuff like that.
Yes.
Like that. So, can you tell us what is that thing that makes them different from other people? What makes them stars? Or is every celebrity also an artist?
Is every celebrity also an artist? Every human is an artist.
Okay, and can I also then ask you another question that I already have? Do you think that you become an artist or you were born as an artist?
I think the act of birth is an act of art. Every human soul comes into this world through a physical body, and it's a manifestation of divinity, really. So you can't really, I don't think you can separate art from humanity. It's a continued conflict and conversation. Most of the time, primarily, so we're trying to survive and we're trying to exist on this planet. Whatever we do to it and whatever we do to each other, the primal force of survival is often in the way of the spiritual task of existing as a manifestation of nature, which is all art. Everything that Jan talked about in his talk, the way that the combination of animal and animus is indivisible for me anyway. So I think we are all artists by nature, and how we choose to express it is where we need guidelines and where we need guidance and where we need really courage. So to take your second question, what makes celebrities famous? Well, these days, everyone's famous for 15 minutes, as Andy Warhol told us. But in real terms, fame isn't important, but what makes people visible on a big platform is really what is within the teaching of Faber's work. It's the courage to be curious. It's the courage to be brave enough to look at yourself and take an inventory of what you are, what you're doing, to take aside ego as the primary driver and make the science of your perfection or imperfection, as you might see in the film, the primary driver of what you do. Does this make sense?
Of course, yeah. Say then that he also talked a lot about mental and physical strength and vulnerability, which also you talked in your work, in your series of photographies. Do you think that for this kind of openness, to be vulnerable to other people, towards other people, your colleagues, you need to have this certain mental and physical strength? And can you exercise it? Can you learn how to develop it?
I think less in terms of learning, and I think more in terms of unlocking.
Yeah.
Physicality is a key. When I was a young dancer, my first job, in fact, was with Jan. And before I even started dancing for him or performing, we ran every day, 5K sometimes. And we trained physically more than we trained dance-wise. I trained as a ballet dancer. And I never understood, I was never a big muscle guy. And Jan was determined to find abs, stomach muscles on me. I never had them and I still don't. And we trained for hours every morning. He and I was the only boy in the company. So every morning we'd get up and we'd run across these crazy fields in Antwerp to a gym, and we'd work out, and he'd be like, "Phil, where are your muscles?" But I was a skinny ballet dancer, we didn't have the training that we have now in terms of the extreme athleticism of classical dance now. It wasn't like that when I was a young dancer. So it was very hard for me to find the physicality of the warrior type guy. But what it did do was, slowly as my stamina increased, slowly as my body began to be cleaner as a weapon, if you like, slowly as my mind got sharper because my blood was cleaner, then I think I became a better performer. So to think of it aesthetically as getting a good body and being strong is the wrong way round. You're really just trying to put oil through the machine, and you're trying to create as clean a channel as you possibly can. Yeah.
Do you, what would you say that was your, I read somewhere that you were first male dancer
Yes.
in Jan Faber's Blind Troupe.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your biggest challenge there as a young dancer?
Isolation, loneliness, which is very contemporary, really, with COVID. I was alone a lot of the time. I was the only guy in the company, and 11 ballerinas, incredible talents. The ballet teacher was female. Most of the team were female, and there was one male singer, and he was an opera singer, completely different aesthetic to us. So I think loneliness was my biggest challenge back then. And long distance running is a lonely pursuit also. So actually the mechanism of running every day. Jan is an intuitive and instinctive director. He often pushes you in ways that you don't at first understand, and they can't be verbalized. It's about what he said of looking at intuition, instinct, and intelligence. And once you start to feed off of those energies, then you start to become able to deal with the challenges, because ultimately performers in the 21st century are scientists, they're religious, they're priests for some people, especially with celebrity, they become gods. So to rise to that challenge, you have to be on your A game, you have to be at your top form, and you have to begin with the body with that, I think. You have to be physically. I remember once during the making of Mount Olympus at the beginning, when all the performers and dancers were coming back from their vacations and from their holidays, and we were just starting the training again for Mount Olympus, all the guys were there's a little bit of chubbiness, a little bit of too much food and too much everything and indulgence and all the rest of it. And slowly as the training started, I was sitting back at the back of the theater with Jan, and he turned to me and said, "Oh, I'm so jealous of those guys, because in 3 months' time, they're going to be warriors again, because they will have trained." And we watched over the period. In the beginning of the film, you'll see these guys skipping, and they are athletes. And in fact, classical dancers, where I went to school in Ballet Rambert, we were on the same campus as the British Olympic team. And one of the big studies that was happening in Roehampton Institute at that time was, who is fitter, a ballet dancer or an Olympic athlete? And in every test, they tested us again and again and again because they didn't believe the results. But in every test, the ballet dancer was cardiovascularly, strength-wise, in every physical test, we were stronger than Olympic athletes.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions that I would like to ask you, but I don't know if we have more time or, yeah. Okay, do you ever, as an artist, so you do a lot of things. You're a creative director, you're a photographer, you're a dancer. Do you ever lose motivation? I mean, do you ever question the meaning of art today? And if you do lose the motivation for art, to do art, where do you find it? I mean, I know you said life is an art, but to really like produce art, because in today's world, you have to produce all the time. You have to be very active. So how do you deal with this? And do you have some advices for us as a young actresses, where we have to really like think about a lot of things at the same time? Vanda, do you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to add just also if it is happening to you, some moments of like just creating just burnout, just some moments where you just don't want to do anything. I mean, how do you overcome these moments and how do you cope with it? And I was just wondering how did
Okay, so the good news is it's transcendable. The bad news is I lose motivation every day, every hour, every minute, every second, every time I wake up, every time I go to sleep, every time I stand on a stage, every time I hold a camera, every time I'm in an edit suite every time something's not working, every time something's working. Doubt is the constant companion of the artist. But doubt is also that undeniable challenger that if you have the courage to face yourself, you will deal with him. I always said when I was a young performer, I used to be sick before every performance. And there was always a bucket by the side of the stage for me because I wouldn't want to go on and I'd be in the backstage and I'm not going on today, I can't do it. Especially in Fabre's work because it's so precise and you can't get anything wrong. And in the dance sections, I had a solo at the beginning of the show, well, it's a duet actually with Annemiro van der Pleum. And we were in suits of armor, harnesses, a motif of the night from Fabre for many years. And we couldn't really see because it were on our heads and we had the choreography, we knew what it was, but we didn't know where we were in space and time. And I was terrified every performance that I was going to fall over or I was going to bump into someone. So I would be sick every time before I went on stage and usually when I came off as well. And our teacher there, I can't remember her name, but one of the guys would, she's a beautiful ballet dancer from Antwerp. And she said to me one day, she said, Phil, she said, what I want you to do is take all that fear and make it into your best friend because your best friend will never hurt you. So if your fear is so huge, you can only confront it by befriending it. And as soon as that fear rises in you, say, hi, fear, how are you doing today? I'm doing fine, thank you. We're going to do this together, right? Yes, okay. Are you staying? For a little bit. Okay. And then you go on with your day and fear is there and it's by your side. Fear, doubt, anger, greed, all of those human emotions that we try to transcend, especially as an actor or as a performer, because ego is sitting by your side the whole time. You have to make friends with these things. It's really the subject of what I was going to talk about, the price of truth, because the price of truth is confronting yourself and having the courage to do that. Does that answer you?
Yes.
Be friends with it. Would you like me to talk a little bit more about the content of the lecture? We can discuss it as we go on. As I speak, I'll speak a bit at a time. We'll see where we get to and what the time goes. Who's in charge of the clock?
I hear Daniela.
Okay. Hi.
There's such a lot of material to go through, and you have a whole movie to watch as well. So should we just start? Do you have more questions before I begin going in, or you want to ask me questions about what I've written?
We would love now if you can just hold your lecture, and then afterwards, Anya and Vanda will ask you just 2-3 questions that came from public on Facebook, and then of course after the movie we'll talk.
Again. So just to confess up front, I had great doubts of doing this because doubt's my best friend. I'm not a lecturer. I'm not a teacher. I'm a human. So when we were discussing the price of truth, I can only face it from my own perspective. And for me, what is the cost of truth? What is the price of truth for an artist in the 21st century? Loneliness, we discussed already. But I think, is it maybe the price of your voice, about having a voice? I think this is perhaps one of the biggest journeys an artist can take. I don't think it's always about what we make. Not even what we do or even what we receive for what we do, the applause. It's instead really having a steadfast kinship to remain urgently curious. This is a big theme for Fabre, I think. And it's about being curious about if we have a voice, what are we going to use it for? And creating a landscape in which that voice has purpose. So I think that's a journey where we learn most, being curious, and trying to find a voice in the first place. And we also suffer through that with fear, with doubt, with anger, with ego, all of those things. But yet potentially, I think also confronting that doubt, confronting the fear, the anger, the ego, all of those things, that's where we get rewarded the most as well. It's not by applause and it's not by success and it's not by fame. I know very many pop stars or famous actors that I've worked with, and they're more miserable than me even, and they're more in pain than any artist I've ever known, because all they have is applause, all they have is adulation. And that's poison, actually, to an artist. I think the most valuable thing we have as an artist is our curiosity. So until we begin to use our voice, then we can't even know where the journey's gonna end. So maybe the biggest task in the 21st century now, especially with COVID and all the rest of it, is despite the pollution that we are experiencing, media, social media, the madness that's all around us, the insane censorship of a single idea, the thought of how we talk to each other, man to woman, man to man, gay person to straight person, trans person to, there is so much confusion about how we address each other and how we interact. It's the enemy of courage, and it's the enemy of all art. As soon as you start to say, you can't say that, you can't do that, you castrate the artist, and it's an impossible landscape in which to work. So I think we begin to find our voice by demonstrating that voice and trusting that it might be wrong and it might be right, and then finding people who will allow us the space to do that. So let's talk about finding the voice. There's a great cost to find. And anyway, interrupt me anytime if you're not sure of what I said, because I'm just reading from my notes at the moment and trying to make sure it's clear. So when we talk about finding our voice and the cost of the voice, we then have to ask ourselves, am I prepared to pay the price of having a voice? Am I prepared to be laughed at? Am I prepared to fail? Samuel Beckett said, try, fail, try again, fail again, try harder, fail better. And this is very important as an artist, to be given the freedom to fail. Doesn't matter whether you're a teacher, a director, a singer, a ballet dancer. I've learned a lot from Amy Winehouse. I've learned a lot from John Bon Jovi. I've learned a lot from Prince, but by getting it wrong together. The beehive from Amy Winehouse, for example, only happened because that day when she came to the studio, her hair was dirty and she refused to wash it. So I said to my hairdresser, what have you got in your bag that we can put on her head so she can perform the song? He went, well, I've got a beehive. So we put the beehive on her head and it became an icon, but it wasn't intended. It was an accident. But there are no accidents in the universe. So it was being able to pay the price of the confusion of that day. Amy won't do this. Find a solution to Amy won't do this, and then pay the price. And then, of course, we have to ask ourselves, how high will we pay in order to be an artist? And I think once you start asking these questions, you're on the right road. Are they ever answered? I'm not sure that you can ever have an answer to whether or not you'll pay the price, but what you do get by paying the price of confronting doubt, being able to face fear, is you begin to have identity. You begin to know who you are. You begin to know what pokes you, what stimulates you, what frightens you, and you have to always gravitate to what frightens you. I think it's Marina Abramovich once, when she was doing a workshop, she brought all the students in and she said to them, I want you all to write some very good ideas and some very bad ideas. Jan and the guys will know this story better than me, but I heard it from when we were in Treblain one day. So the students came in and she said, I want all the bad ideas on the left side of the table, and I want all the good ideas, all the ones you think are your best ideas, on the right side of the table. So all the students came in and they put their bad ideas, what they didn't want to make, on the left of the table, and the good ideas on the right of the table. Marina took all the good ideas and she put them in the bin. She said, okay, that's what you're not going to make. Here's the bad ideas. These are the ones that challenge you, make them. So you have to confront what's uncomfortable in you in order to progress as an artist, I think. So the price we pay then is to embrace an identity and to try one on, try on a mask, take one off, put another one on, try and find out who we are. How do we do that though? And this is where we're in very dangerous territory today. The moment I walked into Treblain again after many years, my biggest feeling was that it wasn't even a spiritual experience. It was, I've just been to Cornwall. Now Cornwall is the bottom of England, and I just dropped my son at university, and I was very pleased to find it was such a strong historical place. There were rocks, and there were waves, and there was sea, and they were unmovable. I felt like Cornwall was not a place that changed for people. People changed for Cornwall. It was a safe place. And when I first went back into the studios in Belgium, I felt like I was in a safe place in which to be dangerous. And I think that's the key to learning as an actor. You have to find yourself in a safe place with people who will trust you and trust with you to be dangerous. If you don't have those things, feel safe, be dangerous, find identity, then you can't have a voice. Does this make sense so far? Good, nodding is good. But safety itself has great cost. Without trust of the individual and the group, without respect for process, for throwing eggs on the stage and breaking them and going, oh, now we have a mess to clean up. I didn't mean to drop it. Oh, but that looks good. What is that? The improvisations that actors go through. Those very dangerous moments where you don't know what you're doing, but you try it anyway. You have to respect each other to do that. And then the freedom to fail, as I said before, trust, respect, freedom. These are the currencies of honest art, I think. And if you take those away, you can't make a stage work. It doesn't matter how good the words are. It doesn't matter how great the music is. It doesn't matter how good the lighting is. These are all ingredients that help us put a bow around our work, but they're not the content. So trust, respect, freedom. It's vital then in that environment, trust, respect, and freedom make the space that you explore together dangerous and safe at the same time. So where do we start with this, like practically, because that's all theoretical? I think we start with the mirror. We start with our own reflection, like Michael Jackson said, look in the mirror. But what do we see? What do you see when you look in the mirror? Everyone's dressed nicely today. Everyone's got their color that they like and the kind of vibe that they look. What do we see? Do we see a body or do we see a soul? That's a question for one of you guys. What do you see in the mirror? Your body or your soul?
We first have to unmute our
Okay, I can tell.
of our machine so we can answer this question. I don't see my soul, honestly. I don't know if I even have one. That is a big question.
Or your essence. Let's not talk spirituality too much. I mean, I use the word soul for our inner self, the self that the Buddha would talk about, or the self that an atheist would even talk about, the subconscious, the sense of ourself that isn't polluted by the mirror. But what do we actually see in the mirror?
I like to take the other states of consciousness to look myself at the mirror under different ways. For example, after some alcohol, some weed, when I alter my consciousness, and every time it's a big wonder, actually. It's so much more there.
Because it's different. So actually, what we're saying here is that when we look in the mirror and see our body, the soul is there or the essence is there, but the ego steps up and tells you what you're seeing. Because the ego is there to protect you. The ego is there to assist you in having good feelings about yourself. But the ego also gets in the way because we I have a nice light on above my camera today so I don't look 900 years old. We all have an ego. We mustn't ignore the ego, but we must harness it. So when we look in the mirror, especially on an actor stage, we have to practice to find the true relationship between the uneasy triptych that is body, soul, essence, ego. We have to begin to unpack what the body is, the physical face, the makeup we chose, the colors we chose to put on our clothes. That's the physical, practical side of it. And then the essence of us is how we feel and how we present to whatever God that is. If your God is fame, your God is money, your God is Krishna, it doesn't matter. That's the soul part of us. And then the ego is the translator in many ways of these things. And we have to know who the ego is in order to moderate him in response to the thing. So this uneasy triptych that we create between looking at the body, trying to hear the soul, and trying to keep the ego quiet, this is where I think, anyway, that we begin to hear the smallest, slightest little whisper of what our true voice is. What is our voice? It's like an echo. And if we can tune in to that, it's an echo or a memory. That's when we can begin to actually go, I do have a voice. So how do we transcend the ego body and begin to operate with subconscious voice or soul voice? A lot of, for me anyway, I won't speak for Jan's teaching, but for me as a filmmaker, when I watched the performers, it's the misery and ecstasy of tearing yourself apart in some of those exercises, especially the animal exercises or the old people's exercises, where you're really putting your body under a lot of physical intensity. It's the fracture of the ego. It's the breaking down of the fake front that most actors bring to the stage, first of all, because they want applause. It's breaking down that so we can transcend body, eradicate ego, and begin to operate with what Jan is calling intuition. But how do we do this? For me, it's an act of surrender. You have a question? No? Okay, good. For me, it's an act of, yes?
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. So for me, it's an act of surrender, which is the title of my film. And it's what I saw every day when I went into the studio. So we're looking in the mirror, but the place we need to find is what I call surrendery. It's the most beautiful place to be. It's every time we look in the mirror should be an act of surrender. We surrender our ego to the truth. We surrender our body to the reflection, and we try to harness the humility to know what we're looking at. Because if you know what you're looking at, if you can look in the mirror and not flinch, even if you've got drunk, even if you've taken drugs, even if you've given a bad performance, if you can not flinch and accept what you see back, then you begin to have a voice. In the film, I always say, and I called it surrender because the actors surrender to the director surrenders to his voice, and the filmmaker, me, surrenders only to observation. I had a mantra when I was making this film, and the mantra was expect nothing, be nothing, ask for nothing. And every day I went to the studio, when I woke up in the morning, and I had no idea what I was making, and Jan made me make the film alone. Very few films are made completely alone. I didn't have a sound guy, I didn't have a lighting guy, apart from Wout and the team in Triblaine. I didn't have what we call a DIT, someone to handle the footage. I had to do everything on my own because it's such a private thing being in a workshop, as you all know, and cameras running around is super uncomfortable for people. So I had to integrate as an isolated, lonely guy, again, like I was 30 years ago, running through the fields of Belgium, trying to find my body. But there was a great power in that vulnerability. So I surrendered only to observation. And I think through surrender, we can begin as actors, performers, artists to subsume all senses, ego, intellect, even pure understanding. They begin to disappear. And it's only through the mastery of our senses that we can go further, we can go deeper into what Jan is calling intuition, instinct, and intelligence. And I wrote down in my notes, and I just watched the stuff with Jan, and I hadn't spoken to him. And it's in a big, bright yellow sticker on my screen right now, is beyond intellect and the constraints of the physical body, we have to learn to operate with intuition if we're going to be intelligent. So it's the same, it's coming from the same place as what Jan is teaching. I think in the 21st century, in the time that we're also lonely, we're doing these quite beautiful Zoom conversations all over the world. I find it very exciting when they have content like this. Intuition is a lost superpower. If you read the book Homo Sapiens, it talks a lot about the evolution of mankind, how myths and stories and agriculture and the slow eradication and extension of species was the biggest driver in humankind losing its intuition, losing its way to live in a community like animals do. So I say if we can get in touch with our intuition again, it allows us to change what I call anyway, our response landscape. If we react to stimulation on stage, in workshop, as an actor, as a director, as a filmmaker, with our intuition, we can control our response to that stimulus. So we can be in the scene and out of the scene at the same time. Jan always used to teach that you have to be falling and standing all at the same time. When you're in a jump, you're not jumping, you're not landing, you're in the air. So you have to be in the exercise and out of the exercise. And you have to take control back at a higher level. As an actor, that's impossible because we want to feel, we want to experience, we want the ego drive of feeling that emotion. But it's actually an obstacle, I think. I just made a new film with a runner who ran 2 marathons every day for 16 days. And on the 4th day, his ankle gave out. And he said, I can't run anymore. And his trainer said, you can run, you must run, because you only did 25 miles today and you have to do another 25 at least, otherwise you won't reach your target. And the runner said, but look at my ankle, it's swollen. And he said, I can strap your ankle. He said, but it hurts. And he said, it will hurt. That's the endeavor. to face pain. And he said, but what will happen? He said, your body will adapt. It's another key word that Jan used in his talk. Adaptation, evolution. So intuition is key to adaptation. If we can learn to use our intuition, we have the power to adapt in real time. So then we become what Jan would call one of his warriors of beauty, because they can be in a scene and out of a scene at the same time. I once went and was lucky enough to go to a rehearsal with Al Pacino in The Taming of the Shrew, Shakespeare. And he's in the middle of a scene in The Pound of Flesh, and he's going crazy on stage. He's absolutely manic. It's only rehearsal, and everyone thinks he's going to be stopped because he's gone too far. And the director is sitting behind me. He was like, okay, Mr. Pacino, if you could just stop a minute. And Pacino stopped and went, yeah, what? And everyone was like, oh, he was acting, because we thought he'd lost the plot. But he was, as an actor, so in control of his emotional landscape, his response to the stimulus was absolutely at genius level. So he could jump into those emotions and jump out of them at will. It wasn't a task for him. It was a part of his stamina. It was a part of his training. It was a part of his aesthetical, physical, body-mind action. Does it make sense? So we look in the mirror, we see our reflection, we're scared of it, we have the courage to surrender to it, and this is how I think we begin to find a voice, to find true intuition as a performer. But we have to trust. We have to trust the landscape that we're in, with the teachers that we have, with the fellow actors that we are with. So I think it's about a way to look in the mirror that doesn't judge ourselves or others. Because as we know, and you'll see in a scene in the film, Jan talks about the fact that the mirror is a liar. It's not even a true portrait of us. Everything's on the wrong side. We don't really see who we really are. When we see a photograph of ourselves or look in the mirror, it's this whole conflict of, is that me? If the lighting's right, if the lighting's wrong. As a photographer, I always say that a good photograph is not taken, it's given. And I have never taken a good photograph of a bad mood, and I've never taken a bad photograph of a good soul. So if you place, as an actor, as a director or a photographer, if you place your subject in a safe place for them, whether they're crying, whether they're broken down, whether they're laughing, whether they're hysterical, whether they're peeing, whether they're having sex, whether they're eating their dinner, if their soul is in a good place, if their performative response to the landscape is safe, they will give you a good photograph. So where does that leave us? What's left after all of that? What's left is, I believe, one voice, and that's purity and beauty. It's the voice of every actor. It's the voice of every sad performance, every happy performance. It's the voice of joy. It's the voice of defeat. It's the voice of hunger. It's the voice of anger. It's the voice of purity. And I think it's in all of us, and it's essential divinity. Martha Graham, who we all know as dancers, said, and this is all about surrender, I think, and awareness. She said there is a vitality, a life force, a quickening that is translated through you, the actor, the dancer, into action. There is only one of you in all of time. This expression is unique. If you block it, it will never exist. It is not your business to determine how good you are or how good your voice is, or how it compares to others with expression. It is your business to keep yourself directly open to the channel. You do not even have to believe in yourself or your work. You just have to keep the channel open, stay aware directly to the urges that motivate you. Keep the channel open. No artist is pleased. There is no satisfaction whatsoever at any time. There is only a strange divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that keeps us marching and makes us more alive than the others. And I think this is the true cost of being an artist in the 21st century. There is no reward, no real reward. There is only the satisfaction that you're in a divine channel. And if we can all create an awareness that we have to reside in the channel, then I think we become better performers. How are we doing for time?
We still have like 10 minutes.
Okay. So if we listen to Martha Graham, we begin to understand from this process of surrender, that surrender through subjugation of ego, we can get closer to her channel of divinity. And this perhaps begins to reconcile the difficult relationship that we experience between animal, Jan's animal, and animus, my soul. Animal, animus, the primal spiritual cycle. No one really talks about it enough. And I think the answer maybe lies somewhere between Eastern mysticism and the Western arts that we now work with today. It's humility in the face of greatness. And again, it's another thing as a student and studier of Fabre that I've witnessed with him, especially in the works where he confronts himself against the great artists of history. Basically, the stuff that he did in St. Petersburg and Namur, that confrontation of where we are in the scheme of things is key to the ability to surrender. If we're willing to be humble enough to say, I'm only here for the beer. I'm just doing my best. I don't know how good I am. I don't know how bad I am. I'm just giving you what I've got. If you can begin to work there, then I think, again, you start to use a decent voice. I'm going to skip a bit so we have time. So then we get back to, let me take you now to, does that make sense as well, what I just said? It's a bit rough, but I think it will be all right.
Definitely.
We talk about the price, and we've talked about the price is no reward. And we've talked about the price being the ability to surrender and transcend sensual reward. But what is the real cost of being an artist? For me, it's a zero-sum game. The fact is, the cost is to and from. Do you have that expression, a zero-sum game? A zero-sum game is that there's no loss and there's no winning. It's equal out. So as an artist, it's a circular economy if you're a good artist. The reward and the penalty is present in the mirror at all times. In physical terms, it's what we talked about. It's the physical cost to your body, and you have to be able to pay enough to be fit enough to that duality. Because when we get fit as well, we start to feel sexy, and we start to feel, I look hot today. My muscles are looking good, and this costume that they made specially for me looks really good. And he's done the lighting so that my left side looks really good, and the writer has written the words so that I sound really good. So there's all this ego triggers going on at all times. And at the same time, we have this doubt. So the schism is what goes on in your mental brain at the time. And a part of that cost is that we have to bear ourselves to that duality. And the most important, powerful act here, I believe, is to create an emptiness. And I've seen this in the classes that happen in film as well. There is this emptying out through conflict, through absolute exhaustion that you get. And when you'll be watching Surrender, and when we were in the making of that, sometimes when we were beginning to perform 24 hours, I remember once being in Antwerp with Jan, and it was 18 hours in on a rehearsal or something. And I couldn't even see my hands anymore. My hands were starting to blur. And I started to question whether or not I was physically there or not, or whether Jan was in front of me or not. My sleeping mind and my waking mind had begun to intersect. But in that moment, Jan and I had this weird conversation where we just were nodding to each other across the space. And I understood what he was thinking, and he understood what I was thinking. And there was this kind of weird liberation of the mind so that the subconscious could take over. And the only way I can describe it is as a return to innocence. There's a great poet who said that he loves children because they speak half English, half language, half God, because they mumble and they make up words, and somehow we understand them. So it's this transcendence of the physical and mental body through exhaustion that you start to realize potential. So how do we pay to become zero? I'll quote Gandhi, because when Gandhi broke the back of the British Empire, all of the leaders of India at that time said, "Oh, Gandhi, you're a great hero. One man has broken the biggest empire that's ever existed. What do you want to do?" And Gandhi went into seclusion for 17 hours and meditated. And when he came out of they said, "What do you want? Do you want a house? You don't have many clothes? Do you want some new clothes? Would you like to be the prime minister? Would you like to be the president?" And Gandhi said, "Where's your ambition?" The word ambition was used. And Gandhi replied, he said, "You know, guys, I am the most ambitious human alive because my ambition is to be zero. Because zero has the biggest potential." So when we get back to the question at the beginning of this is how we pay by having the courage to become zero. But of course, our ego steps up and says, "No, but we have to, if we want to really succeed, we have to bring all our experiences. We have to remember everything. We have to bring that time my girlfriend dumped me, and she has to come on stage with me, and I have to feed off of that emotion, because That's something I really felt, not according to Gandhi, because in the potential of zero, we are everyone and everything that ever happened. All the experiences of all the world have a space to enter the divine channel that Martha Graham talked about, if we have the courage to be humble enough to be zero. Why? Because that's where the courage exists. To be truly empty, that's when we prepare to speak and to be full. It gives you as an actor the potential to be anything. To be, I once said to Jan, why do you use humans in theatre when beetles and paint and the ingredients of an artist don't talk back? And he said, because their imperfections are what make them so immutably transcendent. And yes, a sculpture can live for 1,000 years, it's in the film, but he said a performance is only there then. It happens once and it's gone. And there's a great beauty in seeing that happen in front of you. So trying to live on that border of potential is really the biggest achievement I think an actor can ever have. I'll jump forward, I think. And once we arrive in that place of true emptiness, I think that's where we really find our voice. We really find who we are, and we start to begin. It's like enlightenment, I think. Once we really, depends on what your gig is, on how you get to those moments of ecstasy. Once we've experienced that ecstasy through emptiness, it's the biggest drug in the world. I often say to actors when they come off stage and they go, "Oh, it was really good tonight." I always say, "No, you know you weren't, because you remember it. If you remember what you did on that stage, you weren't there. You were watching the performance with your ego instead of your essence. If you came off on stage and went, I have no idea what happened. What happened? Did I remember everything? That's when you were probably giving the best performance that you can ever give." And the only way we can get to that border, I think, is through an insane amount of patience. Patience that we demonstrate to ourselves for our failures, to our others for when they annoy us in a workshop and they've got this amazing improvisation that we hate, and you're like, "Oh God, they're just going on and on and on." Patience, be patient. Let the experience happen. Let the moment unfold, because it's in the little hidden moments that happen only by accident that curiosity is really triggered, that the voice is really raised, I think. So I think self-knowledge is part of the price that we have to pay, to have the courage to avoid all the external appraisal and focus on making that inner compass strong. And whilst we train our bodies, we become obsessed with all of that aesthetics, it can become a reason to train, I think. And rather than focus on training only as a tool to physical strength, perhaps we make the container stronger than the content. But if we use the training only as a tool to access the content, then the container itself becomes a byproduct. It might be fit, it might be well trained, you might have loads of stamina and loads of muscles, but it's still only a container. So I think it's better to have a Ford, like a cheap car body and a Ferrari mind, than it is to have a Ferrari mind and a Ferrari body and a Ford Mondeo mind. You have to know where the value is, and the value is always in the content, not in the container, I think. And I think we're really fragile creatures. And I go back to the statement that I made earlier on. The only true access to finding a voice is to find yourself in a safe place with safe people that trust each other. And right now, as humans, they're very difficult. There's so much doubt and fear around the world way. There's no real permission to be accidental. There's no real permission to make mistakes. There's no real permission to fail. When we were making Surrender, and the poster of Surrender is a photograph of Gustav. And before I close, I'll tell the story of that. I have tons more pages, but maybe we'll get to them afterwards. And I was filming Gustav in a performance, and it really became a dance between Gustav and her. He had tape over his eyes and didn't know I was there, and I was dancing around him on the stage trying to find these close-up details. And when I came off the stage, I was underneath the stage and I was trying to get a different angle. And I went back to my desk and I was on my own, so I was downloading all the footage, and I was trying to play the video file that I'd just made, and I was pressing it and it wasn't playing. And excuse my language, but at a certain point, I went, fuck's sake, quite loud. And it was just in a moment where the rest of the theatre was silent. And everyone heard me swear. And Jan, who was sitting just lying, went, what's wrong? And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I've just got a problem with a file. So he came over and said, what's wrong with it? I went, it won't play. It won't play. And he said, what is that? I went, what do you mean? He said, what does that say? I said, JPEG. What's a JPEG? I said, JPEG is a picture file. It's not a video file. He said, that's a JPEG. I went, what? I went, that's a JPEG. I went, no, it's a .mov. It's a movie file. He went, no, it says there JPEG. I went, well, how did I do that? He said, it is a picture. I went, yeah, it's a picture. And he went, can it be my poster? I went, but it's an accident. He went, but it's my poster. And he was determined. And I said, but Jan, I don't know how I did that. He went, find out. I went, what do you mean find out? He said, how many variations of technology in your body in that picture? I went, well, it's their manual lenses and it's a modern camera. So there's maybe 4,000 variations of what I did to achieve that picture. And he went, do it 4,000 times. And then you'll know how you did it. But that's my poster. And that's kind of the key to finding that voice, I think, is to have the courage to do 4,000 iterations of something and not shy away from it. To say that in the making of this film, I often found myself as an artist at a crossroads, which are very difficult to transcend, that border of potential, if you like. And I was so focused on my destination sometimes of trying to get the file and open and play the file and make sure I shot things well. And I was super vulnerable in those moments because I didn't have my usual assistants. When I make a film, normally I have 16 people minimum on my crew. And with Jan's film, I was on my own. But because I surrendered to the journey and not focused on what the agenda of the destination, which is the film you will watch, I began to be released from the power of a story or a narrative that I might create for myself. And I think the moment that we fully relinquish power, we actually harness it. It's only by giving up a weapon that we can really learn how to use one. And I think to be uncomfortable in that place is the way forward. I'll close by telling you the story of the lobster, which I think is really an apt metaphor for the way that this film unfolded. A great teacher once said, some people may know this, what is a lobster? How does a lobster grow? A lobster is a soft, fleshy animal inside a fibro motif, a suit of armor, a hard shell. And when it grows, it begins to get too big for the shell. But how does it get out of the shell? What the lobster does is it finds a safe place under a rock or somewhere quiet, somewhere where it feels safe. And then in a very dangerous act, it breaks out of the shell and grows a new one. And then 100 years later, maybe the lobster will be too big for the shell again. Suit of armor, lobster, soft little creature like humans. We're soft, we're vulnerable, same as a lobster. But we don't always have a suit of armor apart from our ego, maybe. The lobster 100 years later goes under the rock again and he breaks out of the shell again. What's the trigger to that breakout? What's the trigger to make that new shell? Discomfort. The lobster is so uncomfortable in his skin that he breaks out of his skin and grows a new skin. In modern Western society, we never become uncomfortable. And with the amount of fragility that's in the world at the moment, discomfort is actually actively discouraged. Don't be uncomfortable. Take a pill, take a painkiller, smoke a joint, take a drink, run away. So that primal instinct of flight or fight is being replaced by stay comfortable. Don't make a noise. Don't be angry. Don't rattle anyone. And is it not true, and Ivana told me this, that the true job of an artist is to make the disturbed comfortable, but also to disturb the comfort. I got that wrong. I'm sorry, Ivana. To make the true job of an artist is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. That's the end of my boring, long talk.
No, it was not boring at all.
Like I said, I've never done one before, so I'm sort of not sure what to do. I hope it was useful.
Yeah, it was in so many moments like inspiring and also reminding me of the workshop, like Anya and me, we are from the collective Igralke, and here is also our professor, she was Ivana, she was also with us on the workshop of Fabre, Ivana was host. And like it's so precious that that we experienced this workshop, because all the things you were talking about were like relatable a lot.
Good.
Only in a week of 7 days, all of us came to that place, at least for a second. But it was even more than that. And also what happened when you were talking about the intuition, what happened with us is like that there was one girl from London, she was attending the workshop as well. And like in these 7 days, we all as a group connected so much, and intuitively, Anya, me, and two of our friends that are from the same performing collective, we asked this girl, Samantha, if she would direct the new piece that we want to do. And we didn't know what is the new piece or anything. And she was like, but how can you ask me? You don't even know what is my CV and what is my work like. And we were like, no, it's just pure intuition. It was just something that we touched together. And it was so strong. And it was not describable with words. It was just, we wanted to be together. And we wanted to do, we still don't have the funds for it or anything. We still don't have a place, but we're creating the space and the place, the safe place.
A safe place to be dangerous.
Yes.
To pick up on one thing you said we experienced it for 1 second. In all the history of all art and all gurus and all spiritual exploration, 1 second is a lifetime. And the whole purpose of being a performer and artist is not for the result, it's for the process. It's for chasing that one moment that might never come again. When you meditate, if you're trying to get enlightened, you're never going to get enlightened. You have to be in the process. You have to be available. It's again like a picture. I don't take a photograph. I don't make a film. I receive them. I try to place myself in the channel. I try to empty myself of all preconception. I try to make myself as humbly available to the content that's coming towards me, and then I try to report it. It's I don't make anything, I represent it, if you like. And I think that's the real job of any artist, whether they're working in fine arts or visual arts or performance. Your courage to be a servant of the performance, the beauty, the job of art. That's the privilege, and that's the true reward. The price is the pain we go through to be it, to make the mistakes. And the danger is to become addicted to the applause or become addicted to judgment. You have to detach from all of that, I think. You have to really become zero, like Gandhi said. It's the most powerful place to exist.
Yes. Now there are like some people here who have questions. Maybe Ivana.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Ivana, and yes, I'm a dancer, choreographer. And actually, I wanted to just this last part of your lecture or your talk about the lobster, about the journey, and not about the destination. I'm wondering if it's also not something about the company. You know, you're going on this journey also in a company. You're not by yourself in life. You're not isolated. You may feel like you are, but you're actually not. You're under lots of influences, whether it be by your family or by your co-workers or professors or whatever. So I more have maybe a comment than a question. That it's about the process. I mean, finding your own voice is something that it's a constant search. You might never find it, or it changes what you think it is. Or I just feel that maybe it's a little bit a neglected thing from our educational system that actually is something that is not being paid attention to.
Okay, yeah. So I think in Western society now, and in many ways, we've stopped teaching unity and we've begun teaching division.
Yes.
So the moment you isolate a human, the moment you isolate any creature that has a heart, you begin to destroy their essence. And being in a company is not about being a member of a group, it's about being a part of a union. And the union is the single soul, if you like. So if we talk again about Martha Grain, it's the divine channel. There isn't you and your friend. We could change the subject of what we're talking about from finding a voice to joining the chorus. It's about like-minded tone. So
I didn't really mean in that sense of, it's shaping you somehow, and you have to, guide your own way through all the experiences you gathered, to be able to look yourself in the mirror and see, who am I? What is my true voice? And this is something nobody teaches you. It's something that you also try and fail over and over again until you find it, or you maybe don't find it. I just wanted to point out that it's something in our Western educational system are not really, I finished the academy, the dance academy, and it's not something that we are taught, to find our own voice. It's something that is mentioned, but nobody gives you the methodology, the right tools, how you approach yourself. You approach certain topics, you approach certain problems, but nobody gives you really tools how you approach yourself. So this is something maybe in future will be more developed as a methodology.
I absolutely agree. And I think it's about, again, physical, mental acuity. It's about training the body, training the mind, and then being available to be rejected.
Yeah. But anyway, it was a question, it was more of a comment because...
Yeah, it's beautiful though. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there is also a question from the audience that was watching live stream. Which one, please?
Okay, by Gabriele Rossana. A few days ago, President von der Leyen proposed a new Bauhaus for Europe as a part of cultural renaissance of Europe, accompanying the Green Deal. However, it still lacks content. How would you fill it in?
I don't fully understand it, but what do you mean?
It's not my question. It's from Gabriele Rossana. So she said,
What content would I put into the new Bauhaus?
Yeah, how would you feel this a new cultural renaissance of Europe that President von der Leyen proposed, like a new Bauhaus for Europe? How would you feel it?
I have no idea how I would feel such a thing. I think, again, my essence as a maker is I respond to the environment. I try to create that that landscape in which I can approach the channel and sit in it with other people who are sitting in it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you, Phil, very much. This was very interesting and valuable lecture. We are now waiting to see your movie, Surrender. People are excited to see it, and we will see you after the film, I guess, if there are more questions directly.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me some time to speak.
Thank you very much. So goodbye from the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, Rijeka. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.